Good morning, folks. Welcome to stream. Today we're going to go after the legendaries on the angler, and we're going to get things set up. Two of them I think will be really fast, and the other three might be a little pain in the butt. I believe KBD and Alejandro are going to be really quick. Goldstein, Mamlambo, and Goto are going to be pretty hard. We'll finish our story time. So let's go here. Morning.
Jacob was engrossed in learning about the mighty dragon clan while helping Helen out in the kitchen. The sound of the main door being opened.
I hope that's as loud as it's loud for you.
Sophie is back with her uncle. Why don't you go talk to them and I'll take it
challenges
from here? Helen said softly to Jacob and gave him one of her endearing smiles. Jacob returned her smile and said, "Sure thing."
Okay.
He walked out of the kitchen,
Set
entered
the rods
the living room,
up.
where he saw Sophie in her light blue school uniform sitting and giggling away with a bulky man with bushy eyebrows.
So we're going to use this for KPD and Alejandro, and
"Hello,
then we're going to use that for Goldstein.
Jacob greeted Sophie's uncle politely.
And
the man did not bother replying to Jacob, but instead he scrunched up his nose in disgust. Sophie didn't try to smooth things out either. She threw her backpack onto the sofa, ran to the kitchen, and started talking to her mom. Jacob felt like he hit a snag with Sophie's uncle within seconds of meeting him. He felt bummed out and found himself a bit annoyed at the man he had greeted so kindly. He sat on the sofa and tried to withhold his feelings by reading the study material he had been looking at since morning for Sophie. Minutes passed by, and suddenly the man said with a grunt, "So, you're Jacob." Jacob did not take his nose out of the books yet and decided to ignore him. But, remembering Helen's kindness and the fact that he was to be married to Sophie, he looked up at Sophie's uncle and said,
"That's
yes,
set up for Goto."
The man did not say
so
anything,
Goldstein
but continued
lure,
to observe Jacob and did not take his eyes off him for even 1 second.
Mamma lure.
Jacob didn't think about it at first,
and
but
then
it suddenly dawned on him that her uncle was observing his level of cultivation.
We are
He felt
going
chills
to
go down his spine as soon as he realized that.
We're going to try to use that, so okay.
Useless. Swallowed Sophie's internal core and had so much time to cultivate, yet no changes to the body. The man mumbled loudly after a few minutes of observation.
KPD is going to be down here.
His words were harsh. Even though Jacob had a calm and collective nature, he couldn't hold back his anger when it came to his self-respect. He glared at Sophie's uncle. Sophie's uncle and Jacob were staring at each other aggressively when Sophie came out of the kitchen and said, "Uncle, Mom's asking if you have any preference for dinner tonight." "Anything will be fine, Munchkin. I'm not picky." The man with his bushy eyebrows and big eyes suddenly turned soft like a little sheep while talking to Sophie. "Okay," Sophie said as she turned around to go back into the kitchen. "Mom, Uncle said anything will be fine. Cook whatever you want." Jacob noticed that Sophie's uncle had a twinkle in his eyes whenever he saw or talked to Sophie.
I think we already listened
to that. It was obvious
chapter.
That he loved his niece very much. Sophie came back and skipped happily across the room to sit down next to her uncle and promptly said, "Uncle, do you remember what you promised me in the car?" All right. I'll give it to you. How could your uncle forget his promise after all, huh?"
Yes.
The man took out a wallet from his...
Yeah, we listened to that one already, so we're going to do this one.
Sharing the core. Helen broke the tension at the dining table after the heated argument between her and her husband's younger brother, Kenneth. The ferocious dragons couldn't keep their calm despite their best efforts. She began asking Sophie about her day at school, and Sophie, unlike her usual temperament, replied softly and in a sweet tone, Sophie knew that the argument had gone way too far. Jacob ate quietly and listened to their conversation. He noticed how alike Sophie and her mother looked. Usually, Sophie had a short temper and Helen was the cool and composed one. But today, it seemed that they had switched roles. Kenneth, on the other hand, ate his food noisily, still trying hard to suppress his displeasure.
Crank it up to 5-speed. KBD likes it fast.
Sophie's father, Dracon, seems to be a wise man with good leadership skills. Kenneth, his brother, in contrast, seems reckless and stubborn. He was poles apart from his older brother. He has features just like Dracon.
We got him
but
already.
His constant grouchiness is probably the reason for his ghastly appearance. Jacob judged the man quietly as he ate his food.
We're hooked up already.
Sensing Jacob's judgment, Kenneth raised his head and suddenly
He
glared
wants
at
to
Jacob.
fight, so we'll just pull back on the rod time down a little bit.
And he didn't look up even
Start
once
cranking him in
after that
some.
glare. Sophie and Helen were done talking by the time dinner was over, and they began to clear the table. Helen asked Sophie to go upstairs with Jacob
drag
to
back
study,
up, drop
and
back
they
down,
both understood that she
back on
wanted
the
them to
rod.
spend time together. But Sophie wasn't in the mood and said, "I just finished eating, Mom. I still want to watch a bit of TV." "No, Jacob will get late. He has to go back to his dorm in time," Helen said firmly, denying her tantrums and leaving no room for discussion. Sophie had just come from school and was in no mood to study, but she obediently climbed up the stairs to her room. Each loud thud of her footsteps made Jacob giggle. Sophie's face turned all red when she got angry, making her look adorable. She also flared her tiny nostrils while arguing, making her look even cuter.
Yeah, we
Jacob
got KBD
couldn't
on
help
this
but
one.
smile at the sight.
Oh, come on.
Jacob laughed, grabbed the study material, and followed her upstairs. He didn't think of Sophie as his fiancée, but as a troublesome girl he liked being around. Unexpectedly, though, Kenneth began following them upstairs. Helen stopped him and asked, "Why are you going upstairs?" "No reason. I just like the view from the top window." Kenneth scratched his head and answered as he continued to climb. It was obvious that he was worried about leaving Sophie and Jacob alone.
Come on.
And so, he followed them to keep an eye on Jacob. He also wanted to see how smart this mortal really was, and if he could actually teach Sophie. Helen clearly knew what Kenneth was trying to do. He wanted to go upstairs to kill the mood, but she couldn't do anything about him. She sighed and left the room. Jacob followed Sophie and entered her bedroom. He turned around when he heard Kenneth following them inside and rolled his eyes. "I'm not going to eat her up," thought Jacob. Sophie didn't care about any of this. She just didn't want to study, but reluctantly sat at her desk.
Oh, come on.
Jacob unzipped his bag, took out a test paper, and put it in front of her. "Let's start with this test paper." "I have a lot of assignments to do today." Sophie looked at Jacob with concern. "We can do them after this, I promise," Jacob said in an encouraging tone. "Humph." Sophie gave in. She took the test paper from him, grabbed a pen, and frowned as she got to work. Jacob had worked hard on the
You
test
watch
paper,
the lower left corner, you
picking
see my
questions
drag.
from
I
a
keep
variety of
adjusting
other
it.
test banks to make a
I
basic
really don't
test
want
for
it to
Sophie.
pull out line, but
He
I don't
wanted to
want it to
gauge
break
how
it
much
either.
she knew. Sophie bit the tip of the pen and did the questions one by one. Jacob dragged the chair, sat beside her, and looked at her quietly.
Here we go.
Sophie's Uncle Kenneth sat on a chair right at the entrance of the room and watched the study session.
Okay, there's one down. Same setup, we're going to go over the spans. Oops.
Jacob ignored him and focused on Sophie.
I forgot to take a
After half an hour,
picture
Sophie
of
finished the simple
him.
test. Jacob took it from her, checked it, and within 2 minutes, he discovered that Sophie's English was extremely poor. Seeing Jacob making big red marks all over her test paper, Sophie couldn't hold back. "Hey, I got so many questions wrong." "You have scored only 20 points out of 100, said Jacob, handing her the paper. "You did it on purpose." Sophie's face went pale as she looked at her paper. "Okay." Jacob took the test paper back,
let's go back
placed
to
it
the
on the table,
lodge.
and said, "Let's officially start your class." Sophie knew she needed the help, but somehow felt embarrassed in front of Jacob. You did the second question wrong. Finish is a verb, and you need to polish it with the adverb quickly. And over here, it says that it's faster than other people, so it should be more quickly, not more quick. Jacob pointed at the second question that she got wrong and explained it to her.
All right.
Sophie blushed. "I know.
Next amendment.
I was careless and read it wrong." Jacob went on with his
Okay,
corrections.
so we got KBD. Let's
You
go
need to use
to
in for the proposition before the
Spain.
year, the month,
Morning.
the season, and the week. When talking about the date specifically, use on. If it's the particular arrival time, such as 5 o'clock, use at. "I know this too. I wasn't paying attention," Sophie
Let's
quibbled.
try that one, but I don't know.
And the fourth question. Sixth question. Seventh question.
Map.
Eighth question. Jacob explained the questions one by one, but Sophie was trying to give excuses and was slowly running out of them. She said that she read the question wrong, or the question wasn't clear enough.
I think
All in
maybe
all,
over here.
she couldn't admit that her grammar was
I think it's
poor.
over here. Let me double check.
In the end, even Kenneth couldn't sit still.
Okay.
He coughed 2 times and said, Soph, you need to pay more attention in class."
Yep, he's over here.
"Third uncle, his test is way too difficult." Sophie's face was red as she spoke to Kenneth. Jacob was speechless. These questions were the simplest and most basic questions for high school English. Even first-year high school students could probably answer half of the questions. Kenneth had a bad temper, but he wasn't stupid. He looked at Sophie and knew that she had a bad foundation in English. Even he couldn't help but admit, "I think you need some tutoring."
Where the heck?
"Third uncle," Sophie whined as her face turned red, the kind Jacob found endearing. Jacob found himself controlling his blush. Kenneth said, "It's about time I leave. Your father should be back soon, so I'll head back now so your father won't nag me." "Third uncle, you're scared that my father will give you a lecture, aren't you?" Sophie's voice seemed chirpier as she teased her uncle. Kenneth felt a bit embarrassed at what had happened earlier that afternoon and said, "Anyhow, I'm going back home now." "Okay, I'll see you off." Sophie jumped out of her chair. "You can just walk me downstairs," Kenneth said as he walked out of Sophie's bedroom. He didn't even look at Jacob before leaving, let alone saying goodbye. Jacob was now alone in Sophie's bedroom. He could hear Sophie's voice as she talked to her uncle. "He's not as bad as you think, Uncle. He is a sweet guy." Jacob smiled on hearing these words come out of Sophie's mouth.
We're in submarine mode.
Helen seemed to have joined the conversation as she said, "Leaving, Kenneth? Dracon is almost back home. You don't want to say hi to him?" "I'll come to see him some other time. I just came to meet Sophie today," he replied. "You're afraid that he'll say you're not working on cultivation hard enough, right? Well, drive safe on your way back," said Helen kindly. Jacob was relieved to hear the main door shut, which indicated that Kenneth had finally left. Sophie came into the room a couple of minutes later and directly began complaining. "Geez, Jacob, you made me look so bad in front of third uncle." "I didn't do it on purpose. You actually got the questions wrong," he said innocently. "Can't you pretend that I did them right?" She looked at Jacob angrily. Jacob smiled and couldn't control his blush this time. Sophie smiled back at him. "I think your third uncle hates me," Jacob confided in her. "Don't take it personally. He doesn't like any mortals." Sophie understood his feelings, but was terrible at consoling. Jacob didn't know what to say, but his impression towards her third uncle went down even further. "He just thinks you're not a good match for me. You don't have to worry. He just says things but won't actually do anything to you." Sophie was straightforward. I actually still don't know much about you guys. What exactly was the spirit concentration scroll that Elder Liam gave me the last time? Jacob asked her. That's the most basic cultivation technique. It doesn't actually do anything. It's simply for the purification of our body. Sophie looked at Jacob. You've been cultivating for so many days now, and yet it seems like your body has had no reaction. It was now Sophie's turn to act bossy, because this was her area of expertise.
Let's see.
Didn't we have a deal?
Don't see him
I tutor
in here.
you, and you teach me the cultivation technique. If I cultivate poorly, it means that you are a bad teacher, Jacob said immediately. Nonsense. I've never taught you before. Sophie glared back at him. Then you can start now. Jacob sat down and looked at her.
Okay.
He seemed sincere, and so Sophie
Let's try
began
this
talking.
way.
The cultivation techniques in the Dragon Clan are divided into, these 8 levels. The highest Kyan level is also called the Heavenly level. Anyway, that's all you need to know right now. You're not even on the elementary level yet. After your body powers up to a certain level, my father or Elder Liam will pass on the real cultivation technique to you. And when you cultivate till Khan level, you will officially become a cultivator. Listening to her vague explanation, Jacob guessed that her cultivation was probably not that remarkable. In fact, Jacob was right about that. Sophie was totally uninterested in the cultivation techniques and only cultivated because she had to. But she did have an angst to prove herself, but she was just plain lazy. That was why she made a mistake the other day and fell into Jacob's arms despite Elder Liam supervising her. Jacob finally understood why Helen and Dracon wanted to punish Sophie for her carelessness. He also understood why they wanted him to spend time with her. It had more to do with just marriage. They wanted Sophie to be safe and become responsible. Keeping his thoughts aside, Jacob decided to continue with his questions.
Come on, Alejandro, where are you at?
Are there any dangers for me to learn your cultivation technique? Jacob was genuinely concerned about this. Of course there are dangers. You could break your arms or legs if you fall. You could even lose your life on the spot, Sophie said in a serious, no-nonsense tone. Jacob looked scared. It's a good thing now, isn't it? You can be my replacement, and it'll be a lot easier for me, she giggled and teased Jacob. Sure, I can be your replacement. I can face all the dangers instead of you. You are marrying me anyway. I can cultivate and share the core with you. You know, when we... Jacob took out his thumbs and touched them together, giving Sophie a sly smile. Sophie proceeded to punch Jacob.
Come on, Nelly. This actually sounds like a pretty good story. It's getting pretty interesting. So come on now. I need him to come in.
Episode 20. Dragon Core's Power. Jacob dodged away and grabbed her dainty hand when Sophie tried to punch him. Surprisingly, Sophie had another strike waiting for him. She formed a fist with her other hand and aimed it at Jacob's stomach and punched him hard. She pulled her arm back and looked at Jacob fiercely. There was a knock at the door right at that moment, and both of them straightened themselves. Come in, announced Sophie, and Dracon pushed open the door and entered. How's the tutoring going? He asked as he walked over to Jacob. Jacob said as he rubbed his aching stomach. It's going pretty well, sir. Sophie's face turned red as she didn't know what to say.
See him there on the right
English
coming in.
Was very poor. We wanted to find her a tutor, but she wouldn't agree. That's why we had to ask you to help her study, Dracon said to Jacob.
Don't think
she's working pretty hard, Jacob said. Sophie looked at Jacob
in
surprise.
Maybe not, I don't know.
She didn't think he would say something nice about her. My daughter here is very notorious. She's actually smart, but she just doesn't work hard, Dracon said as he patted Sophie's head.
So we know where he's coming from now.
Sophie said as she looked at her shoes in embarrassment.
Swap seats.
Dracon looked at Jacob and said, "How's your cultivation going? Did the spirit concentration scroll by Elder Liam work for you?" "Nothing seems to be happening," Jacob replied. "Take your time."
Alright.
He put his hand on Jacob's shoulder and said,
Slow down to 3 and see.
He led Jacob to the attic on the top floor. Sophie was curious and followed them. This is Sophie's mother's studio at home, but she normally doesn't use it at night. After you finish tutoring Sophie, you can come here to cultivate, Dracon said. Jacob looked around. The studio was smaller than 10 square meters, but it was decorated elegantly and seemed cozy. It didn't feel small at all. Jacob noticed a triangular bookcase with all kinds of books about design. On the other side of the room, there was a flat table on which a variety of drawing equipment were kept for drafting. The chair was as green as spring grass, and it added an artistic ambiance to the tiny attic. Through the small window, one could view the backyard that was filled with vivid greens, and it looked very eye-pleasing. Dracon noticed Sophie pouting and asked, "What is it, darling?" "Daddy, do you like Jacob more than me? I am not even allowed to enter this studio. Why is it that he can cultivate here?" Sophie said sourly. "How about you do your homework here, and he gets to cultivate in your bedroom?" Dracon asked her. "No way," said Sophie immediately. "That's right. Go do your homework now." Dracon meant business, so Sophie left unwillingly.
Alright, so since he's here,
Dracon looked at Jacob and immediately began explaining the cultivation technique. There are actually 3 levels in the spirit concentration scroll. The first level is to communicate with heaven and earth, feel the energy in nature, and purify your body at the same time. The second level is to guide the energy into your body. This process is very slow, but it really helps strengthen your body.
Well, let's try.
The third level is to release the energy around your body. You can only cultivate other, more formal cultivation techniques after passing the third level.
Let's try this frog.
Jacob looked at Dracon as he listened to him carefully, trying to memorize what he was saying. He finally understood that Dracon wanted to guide him with the cultivation himself and wasn't leaving it up to Sophie. The first level of communicating with heaven and earth also has some techniques to it. Dracon faced Jacob and explained clearly and slowly. Jacob was touched because he thought Dracon took some time out of his busy schedule to explain these terms to him. However, if the elders saw that the Dragon King was himself explaining these basic terms to Jacob, they would find this incredibly shocking. However, Jacob was utterly oblivious to Dracon's identity, barring the fact that he was a king. Jacob had no idea what the duties and powers he entailed and how revered and feared he was. Dracon's coaching was easy to understand, and Jacob learned a lot.
There we go.
Some things that he couldn't comprehend.
Got Alejandro.
Sure enough, these kinds of things would be difficult to figure out all on his own. Jacob understood that Sophie would encounter a considerable amount of danger over the next years. And within these years, he also had to undertake the same amount of danger to save her life. Swallowing the internal core was a dangerous act. If he didn't follow through the Dragon Clan's cultivation technique to meditate and suppress the energy of the internal core, his body would explode sooner or later due to the growing power of the Dragon Core.
I think it's here.
Jacob now was more eager to cultivate than ever. According to Dracon, the Dragon Core innately contained the instinct of absorbing the heavenly and earthly spiritual energy. Therefore, it was also a supreme treasure of the world. A dragon's body was innately born with the Dragon Core.
The legendaries of diamonds.
Sweet.
That'll work.
The dragons become so strong and powerful. The time seemed to fly quickly as Jacob learned the cultivation technique with Dracon,
menu.
and it was 9:30 in the evening.
Alright, play.
Sir, I should go back now.
Golden
Our dorm's
Ridge.
curfew is 10 o'clock.
Let's see, which one we gonna
Jacob
go
noticed
for?
the clock ticking and said hastily, all right.
Let's
I
try
still
Goldstein
have half
first.
of the technique left to explain, but we can talk about it
We're gonna try
tomorrow.
morning.
Dracon led Jacob out of the
Rods.
studio.
We sell them.
All right.
Welcome to Taylor's
I'll come
Tackles.
see you tomorrow then, said Jacob.
Alright. Challenges.
I'll drive you back,
let's see.
Dracon said in an undisputable tone. Jacob wanted to refuse at first,
we're not gonna
but
get
he
the
nodded because he thought
110
Dracon
pound.
had more to say to him. Helen and Jacob had already established an amicable relationship, but it was about time that he get to know his father-in-law as well. They stepped out of the house and Dracon got out his black Chevrolet from the garage. Jacob got in the car silently.
Okay,
As the
map.
car engine started, he waited for Dracon to begin talking. However, Dracon focused on driving the car and didn't say anything. Jacob had many questions, but somehow he couldn't muster up the courage to ask him anything.
Where is it?
Dracon drove Jacob to the entrance of the dorm by 9:45. Seeing Dracon being so familiar with the campus roads, Jacob suddenly remembered that his group of companies in the mortal world were the biggest investors in his university. This firm donated heavily and was responsible for building the stadium, the library, and the new media building.
Where is...
Jacob kept getting impressed every minute in Dracon's presence. Come again at the same time tomorrow and tutor Sophie after dinner. I think
it's here.
Dracon said after he parked at the entrance of the dorm. Okay, thank you, sir, Jacob said as he got out of the car. Dracon nodded and drove away. Jacob dragged his feet to his dorm. He was tired. As soon as he reached his floor, Sam and others surrounded him. Hey, man, since when do you get round-trip services in fancy cars? Are you dating a rich girl? I'm not dating anyone. I just finished tutoring someone and her dad drove me back. Jacob tried to stay as honest as he could.
I fell off the dock.
Better to tell half the truth than to tell a whole lie,
okay, then.
thought Jacob. How come I never meet a rich girl? Not just rich, pretty, too. Rich girls are pretty anyhow. Sam seemed to be talking more to himself now. Jacob climbed up to his bed as Sam and the others babbled on about women. Jacob's fortunes seemed to be smiling down at him. A lot of women have been giving him attention this year. First, a cute girl comes to meet him on campus. Then the prettiest teacher in college, Susan, calls him to her office. And finally, the class president, Kathy, crushing on him. Jacob didn't want the conversation to continue, so he began pretending to read. But actually, he was just trying to adjust his state of mind. He was feeling enlightened after learning the cultivation technique and was eager to try it out. He began following Dracon's instructions and went deep into his concentration. He maintained the meditative state for a while and let the weak energy flow through the various acupoints in his body.
I can try that popper.
The energy kept flowing
from
his head to toes and back till it finally reached the center of the body. The energy finally reached his abdomen where his internal dragon core was situated. As soon as the energy hit the internal core, the core began to vibrate and the vibration could be felt throughout his body. The vibrations flowed in a faster, easier way now, like the pathways were cleared for it to flow.
Alright.
Jacob felt an internal knock on his forehead, and his body's vibrations seemed to be taking in the external energy. He felt strengthened as the heavenly and earthly spiritual energy flowed inside him. It kept flowing for a few minutes and then stopped for a few seconds.
Had a little tiny fish jumping. It sounded like a gigantic splash.
Hundreds of acupoints in his body. His whole body suddenly became light. He felt illuminated as the heavenly and earthly spiritual energy that was difficult for him to sense earlier was finally filling up his body. It felt as if his body became a transparent sieve. He couldn't keep the energy, but was also not an obstacle to it. It felt like he was rising higher and higher to an inextinguishable power. The feeling of clarity that came from this power was way more refreshing than swallowing 100 peppermints. Jacob tried to enjoy this refreshing experience. He didn't expect the breakthrough of the Spirit Concentration Scroll's first level would be this easy.
Come on.
Episode 21. Teaching a Dragon Princess. Look at the glow on your face. Did your fairy godmother visit you last night? Sam chuckled as he walked alongside Jacob. Going out with a rich girl has given him a different aura, another roommate said as he rubbed his chin. The three roommates were all eyeing Jacob with a grin. He has grace and elegance in his every move, the third roommate said in a teasing voice. They had been teasing him, but Jacob did feel his aura had changed ever since he made the breakthrough last night. It seemed he had merged with nature. Although he couldn't absorb the essence of nature yet, he had a faint feeling that he himself was the nature. He had this feeling after he had just reached the first level of the basic cultivation technique, but he was not a true cultivator yet. No wonder Sophie's third uncle, Kenneth, regarded mortals with disdain, Jacob reflected while he savored the changes in his body. Jacob and his three roommates were on their way to class when they met some of the girls from their class who had just come out of the cafeteria after breakfast. Kathy was one of them. She looked at Jacob and was about to brush past him to take her usual seat in the front.
Let's try
but
else
she
here.
felt something strange, and she turned to take a good look at Jacob.
Try this too.
He is wearing the same clothes as yesterday. There's something different about his presence. Kathy was a little confused by his appearance. She brushed away her thoughts and shook her head. She continued walking toward the class. Kathy looked at you twice. Have you two been seeing each other? Sam asked Jacob with a wink. Jacob snorted. How is that possible? In his heart, Kathy was not only the class president, but one of the most popular girls in the university as well. She was way out of his league. Besides, he was engaged. The roommates walked into the classroom just before the class began. Taking a window seat to get some fresh air, Jacob dug out his study material and started to get ready for his tutoring session with Sophie. Why didn't you reply to my text yesterday? In the middle of class, Jacob received a text message from Kathy. Surprised, he looked up and met Kathy's gaze. He wondered why the diligent, always with her head in the books, class president would send him a message during the class. Hurriedly, he looked down and answered her message. You mean about the long-distance run? I got it. You are the only participant in our class, and only 6 have been selected in our whole major to enter the games. I hope you won't disappoint me. She sent another text message. All of a sudden, Jacob had a palpable amount of pressure. The biennial athletic games in the university was a competition held among all the students, regardless of age. The most athletic students, selected from the tens of thousands of students in the university, would compete with one another. It was a big show. Got it, Jacob answered the text message. He had been a renowned long-distance runner in high school, but he had never entered any inter-school competitions and didn't gain points for it during his university entrance examination. Kathy had high hopes for him, but he was not so confident with himself. Although he was fast, he had spent almost all his time playing video games after he entered university. It had been a long time since he had put any real efforts into practice.
Let's try this.
Thinking that was the end of their conversation, he was surprised when Kathy sent him another text saying, Did you get a haircut yesterday? How come I feel like you look different today? No, I didn't, Jacob answered. Then Kathy stopped messaging him. Jacob wondered if he had sounded uninterested. He was immersed in high school English practice questions. In the evening, Jacob again took the bus to Sophie's home. No longer a stranger, Jacob was not as reserved as last time. However, he still remained silent on topics about their family. After dinner, Helen declined Jacob's offer to clean the table for her and asked him to tutor Sophie. Reluctantly, Sophie followed Jacob up to the second floor. Giving it a day's thought, Jacob had decided to tutor Sophie according to the different knowledge points. Today's quiz focused on the most common topic in the high school English course, the tenses. Time went by quickly. Sophie racked her brains and finally finished the quiz.
Come on, Goldstein.
Are you sure you were really good at it? With her chin propped up in her palm, Sophie was spinning a ballpoint pen with the other hand and watched Jacob mark her paper earnestly. She had changed out of her school uniform into a short t-shirt with a kitten print on the front and a red plaid skirt. Jacob was trying not to get distracted by how unbelievably cute she looked.
It might have been him.
Slouching on the chair with her legs curled beneath her, she was oblivious that Jacob could see her belly button. If you learn earnestly with me, it won't be too difficult for you to be one of the top 3 in your class. Jacob scrawled a big red score of 30 on the paper before returning it to her. Ignoring her pouting lips of disapproval, Jacob pointed at the first question and began to explain. Since it uses yesterday in the first part of the sentence, you must use past tense with the verb. And the past tense of say is said, not saved. Hey, listen up and note this down. Seeing Jacob's earnest face, Sophie looked resentful. Still, she had to listen to him and began taking notes in her notebook. Jacob had seen the books in Helen's studio and knew her English was excellent. He wondered how her daughter didn't pick up the language from her.
Come on.
At the end of the 1-hour tutoring session, the upper end of Sophie's ballpoint pen was almost chewed off, showing how much she resented studying. Jacob, follow me upstairs. Dracon showed up by the door promptly after the study session. Okay. Putting down the papers, Jacob followed Dracon up the small stairs into the studio. It seems that you have broken through level 1, Dracon asked when they were inside the studio. It seems so. I feel that my body has been unlocked.
Well, let's try this one.
Well, good job. However, the first level is quite simple. Today, I will teach you the next part. Dracon looked calm, without any signs of surprise or joy. Jacob sat down and listened to him patiently, wondering what realm Dracon had reached. Whatever realm Dracon was in, it couldn't be low. Jacob had never dreamed of flying in the sky, entering the earth, shattering the mountains, and tumbling the oceans. Saving his own life was his purpose, and if he achieved some accomplishments in his cultivation, he would be more confident in helping Sophie survive the crisis when the time came. Of course, he knew that Sophie's family was trying their best to help him, though strictly speaking, Sophie had caused all this trouble. However, they would rather place their own daughter at risk than sacrificing innocent Jacob. That alone showed more wisdom and fairness than most parents could ever have. Soon, it was 9:30, and Dracon had explained every point of the Spirit Concentration Scroll in detail. You can come back at the same time tomorrow. Then, you can cultivate by yourself and ask me whenever you have any questions. Glancing up at the clock, Dracon instructed. Jacob nodded. Walking out of the studio to the second floor, he entered Sophie's room and found her working hard on her homework. Not wanting to interrupt her, he gathered his tutoring materials and quietly left the room. I'll drive you back. Dracon appeared at the door and offered. Thank you, Jacob accepted. On the way back to school, Dracon suddenly asked, Can you drive? I got my license last summer, but I'm still a beginner, Jacob answered. How about I buy you a car so you can come and go with ease? Which one would you like, a Chevrolet or a Volkswagen? Dracon asked casually, as if he was talking about a $10 toy instead of a car worth thousands of dollars.
Excuse me, guys.
Didn't pursue the topic.
Yeah, I had to sneeze.
Drove Jacob to the dorm building in silence. Okay, Please tell Sophie that I have to participate in the athletic games next week and I'll have to practice. I'll resume the tutoring sessions next Tuesday. Okay. Dracon restarted the car with a steady hand and disappeared around the corner. A calm father-in-law, a gentle mother-in-law, a willful young fiancé. What more will come my way? Inhaling deeply, Jacob walked into the dorm building.
Plot twist, once he marries their daughter and cultivates, then they kill him and eat him. Oh.
Apparently, they were at an internet cafe playing games. Opening his backpack, Jacob was in the progress of reorganizing the tutoring material and saw that a big pig head had been drawn on the title page of his high school English test bank. A coarse nose, bulging eyes, droopy ears, and thick lips. On the side were the words, "I'm the pig head owner of this sad book." Gazing at the caricature of the pig head that was meant to look ugly, but actually looked a bit like him, Jacob chuckled. Episode 22. The Athletic Dragon.
Oh, come on. Yeah.
For the next 2 days, Jacob didn't tutor Sophie and spent his nights practicing long-distance running on the sports field. He wasn't expecting to win first place, but he didn't want to end up coming last either. During the first practice, he was happy to know that his running skills were still intact and he just needed to regain his form.
Goldstein wants to be a
The 400-meter
pain.
racetrack formed the boundary of the
I
soccer
fall
field,
off the
and
dock
as
again.
night fell, only 4 to 5 lamps illuminated the track. The field was empty and quiet. Regulating his breathing and steps, Jacob practiced alone. He had purposely chosen to run here at 9 o'clock at night.
Let me try this
In 1 hour, the entrance of the dorm buildings would be locked up. The basketball and soccer players had already gone back to their dorms, and so he would have no distractions while practicing. Today, in optical signal processing class, Susan, regarded as the prettiest teacher in the university, was wearing a black studded shirt, denim shorts, and brown leather boots. She looked so gorgeous that plenty of students seriously considered asking her out. But she didn't even glance at anyone's direction, not even at Jacob, whose sudden visit to her office last week had caused quite an uproar. She remained professional during the entire class and did not talk to anyone unless it was absolutely unavoidable. Although Jacob knew they crossed paths in another world, they had returned to the normal world and continued being strangers to each other. In this world, she was a teacher, and he was like any other student. Though Jacob was sure that Susan must have gone to Elder Liam to talk about him. When Jacob practiced his form on the racetrack, his mind wandered a lot, and he couldn't stop thinking about his new dragon clan. Sweaty and lost in his thoughts, Jacob stopped abruptly when a basketball rolled towards his feet.
Come on.
He picked up the basketball and turned around to see where it came from, and he saw a tall guy approaching him. Looking at the strong build and muscular physique of the guy, Jacob immediately knew that it was Michael. Wearing a white jersey, Michael stretched his brawny hands to take the basketball, and Jacob immediately tossed it towards him. Known as the most handsome and athletic student of the university, Michael was the president of the university's rock climbing club and the celebrity student who was even pursued by the most popular girl in the school, Lisa. Michael reached out and caught the ball that Jacob had tossed at him. With the ball safely with his owner, Jacob swung his arms and prepared to start jogging again. "Sophomore?" Michael said suddenly. "Huh? Yeah, I'm a sophomore." Jacob turned to face him. "I heard that you've also given your name for the 1,500-meter race?" he asked. Jacob looked at him cautiously, sensing a hint of hostility in Michael's voice. "I heard that you've been in the limelight quite a lot recently," Michael continued, while spinning the ball on his right index finger. "You think you're quite suave, don't you, Mr. Sophomore? Getting picked up by a limo and dropped back in SUVs. Acting stylish, aren't we now?" "Did I steal your show?" Jacob asked directly. In a snap, Michael stopped spinning the basketball and said, "Yeah, I'm pissed off by your blatant show of wealth." Though he remained low-key, Jacob was never afraid of confrontation. Getting face-to-face with Michael on the racetrack, he asked, "So, as a senior, you want to teach me a lesson, don't you?" Michael didn't answer. Instead, he asked, "They say Susan asked you to her office all alone. What's going on between you and her?" Jacob sensed an intense amount of jealousy in his voice. "I have nothing to say to you," said Jacob, and sprinted off to practice for the race. Michael froze for a moment, surprised that an ordinary sophomore would be so arrogant. He gripped the basketball tight as he scrunched his face in anger and looked at Jacob sprinting away from him. By the time Jacob returned after his lap, Michael was gone. Jacob knew he had attracted a lot of attention in the past couple of weeks, and the several limo pickups on campus made him look like a big show-off. More importantly, Susan's invitation to her office made the popular guys envious as the girls were now eyeing Jacob. The boys on campus had the feeling that the fancy cars were an effort on Jacob's part to woo Susan, and it had worked. This infuriated them a lot. After all, their efforts only got the attention of college girls, but getting a pretty lady like Susan to go out with them was a dream come true. While she didn't even glance in their direction, Susan seemed to show a great deal of interest in Jacob, and it ticked off guys like Michael. Jacob didn't blame them. Susan was attractive, and he would be head over heels for her too if he didn't know she was an inspector of the Dragon Clan. It was almost 10 when Jacob jogged back to his dorm. Sam and his other two roommates were engaged in a fierce card game with Ken from the dorm room opposite to theirs. Jacob grabbed his towel and took a cold shower. He decided not to tell his roommates about the confrontation with Michael.
Keep hearing this blast, but
Friday passed by quickly with only half a day of classes. As most of the students came from localities nearby, the university was usually quiet every Friday afternoon because most of the students went home. Sam and the others didn't want to go home this weekend, and they dragged Jacob and several others from the next-door dorm room to a nearby karaoke. After singing till their throats went sore, they went to a hot pot buffet. They stuffed themselves with beer and meat before returning to the dorm room for a game of cards. The day went by like a breeze. It comforted Jacob that he had a fun and trustworthy group of friends with him, no matter what happened. They did everything together. Going to classes, skipping the classes, drinking, and feasting. Sophie's third uncle would never appreciate this kind of happiness enjoyed by mortals, Jacob thought to himself. At 9 o'clock, Jacob put down the cards in his hand and said, "I'm going to the sports field to practice for the race." He didn't have a single glass of beer that day. His focus was on the competition. "Oh, don't go. It's no use practicing with only a few days left before the race. Play cards with us." Sam tried to stop him. "I can regain some of my form with practice. Ken, come over and play cards." Jacob stuffed his cards into Ken's hands. "It's on me if you lose, and you get all the benefits if you win." Grinning at the promise, Ken took his cards and sat down immediately. Jacob changed into his running shoes and jogged to the sports field. The campus was extremely quiet on Friday nights. When he was passing by the office
Goldstein must be
building,
contraried
Jacob looked up
today.
involuntarily as a weird thought occurred to him. Susan should be home now, shouldn't she? But where does she live?
All right, well.
Helen said Susan had some special connection with the North Atlantic Dragon Clan, and Jacob wondered what it was. Maybe that was why she took a teaching position at the university? He was staring at Susan's office door when he saw two girls passing by, and when he met their gaze, they snorted in disdain.
No bite.
Every guy in college, more or less, was caught staring at Susan's office in hopes of seeing her. She couldn't be found anywhere else because she never lingered in corridors, had conversations with other teachers or students, or stepped in the cafeteria. Her unattainability made her even more desirable. Jacob left the corridor and reached the sports field. He began to run 10 laps according to his plan. He found that his stamina recovered faster than before, and he wondered if it was a result of the breakthrough into the first level of the spirit concentration scroll. The dim lights extended Jacob's shadow while he enjoyed the vast sports field and the loneliness of the night. Circulating the energy according to the sphere concentration scroll and savoring nature's essence, he regulated his breathing and steps as he ran at a steady pace. His clothes floated in the air. Jacob didn't realize there was a bright and calming aura around him when he ran. Every step he took was steady and firm, while a light breeze swam around him and swayed his clothes. The order of nature had unknowingly influenced Jacob, and each of his movements were as easy as a breeze. It was as if his body had become part of the 5 elements. After 10 laps were done, he decided to run for 10 more laps. Jacob was surprised that his strength had not diminished at all. He was practicing long-distance running, but he felt like he was strolling casually without any strain in his steps.
Okay, this one's going to be a pain.
During his second round of laps, he suddenly had a feeling that someone was watching him from a corner. He looked towards the entrance and saw Kathy. She was wearing a long chiffon floral dress and was sitting quietly on a step a dozen meters away. She was watching him with a wide, expectant smile on her face. She looked so pretty in the dim lights of the field. Jacob smiled back and decided to approach her. Episode 23, A Date with Kathy. Jacob saw no one else around, and it seemed like she was at the sports field all by herself. After a moment of hesitation, he jogged over. What are you doing here, Kathy? I'm here to watch you run. Kathy tilted her head and smiled. Her raven black hair covering her shiny forehead and her long ponytail trailing over her back gave her a studious look. But today, she was wearing her hair down, and it made her look pretty. A gust of wind swept through Kathy's hair, and Jacob could smell them from a distance. He looked at her slender figure, silky hair, the blush on her round face, and her dimples as she smiled at him. He was smitten. Jacob had always thought Kathy was pretty, and so did all the guys in his class. But she focused on her academics most of the time, and her duties as a class president. This kept her away from the popular girl tag, and the status went to Lisa and a few other girls on campus. But Kathy was prettier than the rest of them, and this fact was undeniable. Jacob couldn't help but blush as he looked at her. He found her more attractive than ever tonight. "How did you know I was practicing here?" he asked her. He may have been sweaty while running, but now he was sweating profusely in Kathy's presence. "I am the class president, and I know everything." Still smiling, Kathy looked at Jacob confidently. "You have been practicing here at 9 every night. Am I right? Well, you look dashing when you run." Kathy broke his thoughts. Embarrassed, Jacob lowered his head. "It's an honor to receive a compliment from the beautiful class president," he said. Kathy smiled sweetly and said, "I'm the class president, and it's my duty to encourage you for the sake of our class honor." "So you didn't mean it? It was just an encouragement?" Jacob gave her a disappointed look. No, I meant it. It is also an encouragement. You do look attractive when you run," she added quickly. The moment she said that, she felt she was a bit hasty in showing her feelings. She lowered her head and bit her lip. "Thank you for coming down to see me practice and to encourage me." Jacob dug out his mobile phone from his pocket. "It's now 9:40. The dorms will be locked up if we don't hurry back." "Today is Friday, and they won't close until 12, Kathy reminded him. "Oh, I had completely forgotten." Jacob thought for a moment and said, "But it's still late, and I have finished my practice. How about I walk you back?" "Aren't you hungry?" Kathy asked him abruptly. Jacob stared blankly at her for a moment. "I have instant noodles in my dorm." Seeing the silly expression on Jacob's face, Kathy smiled. I'll treat you to a late-night snack as a reward for practicing so hard. Okay, sure. Jacob nodded. He had not expected that Kathy would invite him to a late-night snack, or a late-night anything, for that matter. The fact that she came to watch him practice at night itself was a big surprise. Wait a minute. Jacob asked Kathy to stay where she was before dashing across the field and picking up the jacket he had left on the grass. Then he ran back to walk by her side. Standing on the stairs in her elegant short dress, as she was silhouetted against the night and the lamplights, she looked even more pretty and alluring. Let's go, Jacob said to Kathy. Kathy nodded and followed Jacob out of the fenced sports field. As they began to head out of the sports field, they felt a chilly gust of wind. Without thinking, Jacob immediately draped his jacket over Kathy's shoulders and then shielded her from the biting wind with his body. Wow, are you always this chivalrous? Said Kathy as they reached the campus corridors. Yes, you wouldn't have noticed it before because I'm always with Sam and my other crazy roommates. There's no way I'm going to be chivalrous to them, Jacob chuckled.
That him?
Ha ha ha. Sam and those guys are sometimes indeed outrageous, but I think you are different, Kathy told him as they walked. It was close to midnight, and it was quiet with no one in sight. The dim lights from the scant street lamps and the cold, crisp air, and Kathy's lingering fragrance made it all too romantic for Jacob, and he was lost in her charm. I'm not so different. In fact, I'm no better than them. Jacob tried to stay honest. I think you are more earnest with things.
Okay, but somebody get up here.
For the race, Kathy couldn't help but speak up for him. Jacob smiled. I'm a bashful man who's afraid of losing. Kathy remained silent for a while as they slowly walked towards the university gate. Jacob had never imagined that he could take a walk with the most popular girl in the class, alone on the campus on such a quiet night. What do you want to eat? Kathy interrupted his thoughts again. Spicy hot pot? Jacob responded immediately. Okay, Kathy agreed promptly. It suddenly occurred to Jacob that the guys from campus could also be out eating late tonight. They would have a blast gossiping about him and Kathy if they saw them together. Kathy didn't seem to share his concern when she cheerfully walked to the only spicy hot pot stand near campus. She turned to ask Jacob, What do you want to eat? Pick whatever you want. Seeing her excited about treating him, Jacob set away his concerns. He picked up some skewers of meat and vegetables and placed them in a basket before handing it to her. They sat at a table in the open air and waited impatiently for the delicious-smelling skewers to be picked up from the pot. Guys, don't show up now, Jacob prayed silently while they were waiting for their food. Why do you look so nervous? Looked at Jacob and questioned him. No, I'm not. Jacob looked at the pretty girl in front of him. This is my first time eating a late-night snack with you, the class president. Of course, I'm a little nervous. Is it your first time eating a late-night snack with a girl? Gazing at Jacob with her bright eyes, Kathy asked again. Who told you that? It isn't true at all. When I was in high school, I had a girlfriend, Jacob blurted out. Seeing Jacob's stiff expression, Kathy giggled. I don't believe it. Jacob curled his lips in embarrassment and decided to turn the question on her.
Damn it.
Miss Class President, you are so pretty, you must have had many boyfriends before. Kathy shook her head, and her hair swayed as she did. Her hair looked shinier under the streetlights. I guess we're more alike than I thought, Jacob said, without thinking. 2 spicy hot pot dishes. The stand owner's wife brought the food to them. Jacob noticed that not only the stand owner's wife, but the guys eating nearby as well were sneakily looking at her. Eat. Kathy looked at the food and handed a pair of chopsticks to Jacob. Kathy, why didn't you go home this weekend? Jacob asked her while he opened up the packet of chopsticks. Because I wanted to watch you run, Kathy answered without thinking. She snickered at the surprised look on Jacob's face. Okay. I stayed to help the student council organize the sports event. So inviting me to the meal was not in your original plan? Jacob asked. Let me think. Kathy lowered her head to take a bite of a meatball. I planned only to watch you practice, but later I decided to reward you with a meal when I saw you practicing so hard. Jacob didn't care if she was telling the truth or not, since he was quite excited that Kathy had come over and watched him practice late at night. The other day when Susan asked you to go to her office, what on earth happened there? Kathy asked abruptly. She saw me talking in class and took me to her office to give me a lecture, Jacob answered. Kathy didn't look satisfied with the answer, but she didn't argue. She asked him another question instead. What about the schoolgirl who came to see you the other day, in the cafeteria? She is one of the girls I'm tutoring. She just came here to mess with me, Jacob answered promptly. He had a lot of time to prepare for these questions. He looked at Kathy. You seem quite interested in me lately. The things that have happened with you recently made it impossible for me not to notice them, Kathy retorted. With a grin, Jacob lowered his head and began to slurp down the noodles. He was genuinely hungry. What Sam and the others told me last time was just a joke, wasn't it? Kathy asked. Huh? Jacob raised his head, and his face had turned red because of the spicy food he had eaten. They came over and told me that you liked me. Kathy bit her lip before forcing the words out. Her big eyes with long eyelashes looked exceptionally beautiful, even in the shabby late-night meal stand. Jacob's face turned even redder. No, they were just kidding. Oh, it's not important. I felt they liked to joke around. Kathy smiled brightly, seeming indifferent to the whole incident. The seniors didn't cause you any trouble, did they? After a while, Kathy asked, abruptly. Why do you ask? Jacob was suddenly cautious. I heard from the student council that some troublesome senior male students had been displeased with your behavior in the past couple of weeks. They declared that they would teach you a lesson. Kathy stared at Jacob while she expressed her concern. Well, it's no big deal. Indifferently, Jacob went back to eating. I know some of them. Do you want me to clear up the misunderstandings? Kathy asked for Jacob's opinion. It's not a big deal. You don't have to trouble yourself with it. Jacob declined with a wave of his hand. He didn't think those guys would cause a lot of trouble for him. More importantly, he didn't want Kathy to go through any trouble. The air got cooler as Jacob and Kathy finished their meal and began heading back. Jacob accompanied Kathy to her dorm building. Do your best at the athletic games. Standing at the door, Kathy encouraged Jacob with a smile. Got it. Class president, have a good night. Jacob waved at her. For some weird reason, he preferred to call her class president instead of her name.
Come on.
He turned around to walk to his own dorm building, and a question occurred to him. Was this a date? If it had not been a date, how come he felt so much closer to her? It sure seemed like a date, thought Jacob. Or maybe it was Kathy's way of encouraging me to perform better during the race. Jacob shook his head to get rid of his wild speculations. Back in his dorm, he took a shower and went to bed. Early next morning, a Saturday, Jacob was woken up by the constant ringing on his cell phone. Jacob, what the heck? Sam was the first to wake up. He threw aside his quilt and dashed to the table before tossing the ringing mobile phone to Jacob, who was sleeping on the upper bunk. An unknown number flashed on the screen. Who is it? It's still early. Jacob answered the phone with a trace of displeasure. I'm Dracon. Our car is now in front of your dorm building. A steady voice came from the phone. Episode 24.
PBS needs you. Help us reach our goal of $30,000 during Public Media Giving Days. With the threat of losing federal funding, it has never been more crucial to stand with 13 PBS. Why? Because PBS is
A family weekend. Dracon's voice stupefied Jacob for a few moments. He quickly put the phone down and rushed to the balcony and saw the familiar black Chevrolet parked in front of his dorm. He went back into the room without thinking much and threw on some clothes and shoes. Jacob then picked up his phone and sprang out of his dorm and rushed downstairs. Dracon was in the driver's seat while Helen was in the passenger seat. Sophie was sitting in the back with a frown on her face. "Why are you here?" Jacob asked in surprise. "We are going on a weekend trip, and we are here to pick you up," Dracon responded calmly. Jacob was shocked at Dracon's assumption that he would readily agree to something like this. He began fishing around for an excuse. "Today, I'll have Liam speak to the school if there is something you need to do," Dracon said. Jacob struggled for a bit before he finally gave up. "All right, it's not a big deal. We don't need to speak to the vice principal." "Okay," Dracon nodded. "Get in the car." Helen smiled at Jacob. Jacob opened the door awkwardly and sat in the back beside Sophie. He had no other option but to spend the weekend with his in-laws and his fiancée. "Mom, why are we taking him? You said it was going to be a family trip," Sophie complained. "Isn't Jacob a part of our family?" Helen said softly. Sophie didn't know what to say. She thought about it, and Dracon interrupted just when she was about to argue again. "We'll just go back home if you keep complaining. You can go do your homework then." That threat certainly worked at suppressing her temper as she stopped arguing. She was not happy, though.
Yeah.
Sophie thought that she was finally going to get a break from the chaos of the past few weeks. "Jacob, you haven't had breakfast yet, have you?" Helen turned around and asked gently. "It's okay. I'm not hungry," Jacob answered. "Open up the bag, Sophie. Give Jacob a sandwich," Helen said. Sophie opened the Ziploc bag and kept it open for Jacob. He took out a ham and cheese sandwich and said, "Thank you." Dracon pulled out of the college driveway and cruised along the empty roads. Sophie lurked in the corner and kept her distance from Jacob. It had nothing to do with Jacob, though. She just wanted a quiet weekend away with her parents and not think about her marriage for some time. But it was obvious that wasn't going to happen with Jacob accompanying them. They soon touched the highway, and each one of them was enjoying the smooth ride. Since no one was talking, the long drive and similar views outside the window were starting to make everyone sleepy. Both Jacob and Sophie began dozing off. Jacob was sleepy anyway because of all the running practice and the late night with Kathy. As for Sophie, it was due to her excitement of the trip today that made it difficult for her to go to sleep last night. The comfortable seats of the car made her want to sleep as well. As they dozed off, their bodies leaned towards the middle of the back seat, and they ended up holding each other without realizing. "We are here." A crisp voice woke them both up. Jacob and Sophie slowly woke up as they realized that they had been holding each other for hours as they slept. "Oh my God!" exclaimed Sophie, embarrassed as she woke up next to Jacob, his arms wrapped around her. She had a sound sleep, too, and that made her feel even more embarrassed. They both quickly recovered from their stupor and focused on the destination. The surrounding view of green mountains and clear waters soon put a happy smile on her face. Jacob wiped the drool from his mouth and got out of the car, too. He realized that they were at the foothills of a green hill. "What place is this?" asked Jacob. "Wildcat Mountain," Helen answered. "Wow." Jacob was surprised at how pretty it looked. Wildcat Mountain State Park in Wisconsin was a haven for hikers and campers. Though Jacob had heard a lot about it, he had never bothered to make a trip here. "Let's go to the top of the mountain today and climb back for the stay," said Helen. "Huh?" Jacob was surprised. He was still coming to terms with the idea of this spontaneous trip, and now to hike all the way to the top and climb back down, and to stay with the dragon family, it was all too much. Jacob couldn't run away, even if he wanted to, because he didn't know how. He wasn't even sure if any bus would take him back. Plus, he had made a commitment to protect Sophie. How could he back out now? Sure, the plan seemed a bit forced, but it was all to bring the family together. Jacob sighed and tried to get comfortable with the situation.
Go to the bathroom.
"Let's put our belongings down at the hotel first," Helen suggested. Dracon put away the car key as he nodded. He took the large traveling bag from her and headed towards the hotel nearby. Although Dracon didn't talk much, Jacob could feel the tacit understanding and loving relationship between him and Helen. "Here." Sophie stuffed her backpack into Jacob's arms and skipped behind her dad. Jacob felt a little awkward knowing that he had to stay with them for 2 days. However, there was no way back at the moment. He threw Sophie's backpack onto his back and followed them to the hotel with a shrug. Dracon paid for 2 rooms, and suddenly something dawned on Jacob. "They wouldn't make me share a room with Sophie, would they?" Jacob thought to himself. "Let's go." Dracon patted him on the shoulder after noticing Jacob's hesitation. Jacob suddenly realized that he would be sharing a room with Sophie's dad, and Sophie would be in the other room with her mom. "What was I thinking?" Jacob mumbled to himself as he walked into the room with Dracon. Their rooms were opposite each other. Jacob followed Dracon into the room and found that the rooms were elegantly decorated, even though they weren't too large. He pulled back the curtains, and the beautiful scenery of Wildcat Mountain came into view. A wave of fresh air caressed his face. He had never breathed in such clean air in the city. "Put everything down and freshen up a little before we start the climb," Dracon said to Jacob. "Okay." Jacob put Sophie's pink backpack on a chair and walked into the bathroom. He brushed his teeth as well as rinsed his face. He had left his dorm room in such a rush that he didn't even have time to do that. It was pretty embarrassing, come to think about. The 3 of them were already waiting at the door when Jacob stepped out of the bathroom. "So slow," Sophie mumbled. Jacob was amused at her anger and smiled lightly as he picked up her pink backpack and put it on his shoulders. He gave her a little nudge on the way out. She smiled for a split second and then became serious again. They all stepped outside the hotel and began exploring their whereabouts. Come on, let's begin the hike," Helen said as they reached the beginning of the trail. "Okay, let me give my grandma a call first. I was supposed to go visit her this weekend," Jacob suddenly remembered and took his phone out. He dialed home and told his grandma that he wouldn't be able to visit her this weekend since he was going out with his classmates. His grandma wasn't upset and told him to have fun. Jacob bit his lip as he lied to his grandma. Helen noticed the way Jacob spoke to his grandma and felt that he was affectionate and responsible. She was more sure than ever about this man marrying her daughter. "The air here is really fresh. You should bring your grandma here sometime. There is a homestay at the foot of the mountain. Children your age bring their parents here to escape the heat, as well as enjoy each other's company. The elders can play cards, chat, and try out some refreshing dishes. This place is pretty relaxing and popular," Helen said to Jacob as he hung up the phone. Jacob smiled at Helen. "I am so not ready to tell Grandma about Sophie, but Helen makes it sound all so simple," thought Jacob, and sighed out loud. Plus, he didn't know how Grandma would react if she came to know he's marrying someone younger than him. "We are a family, so don't be so formal." Loosen up a little. Let's start the climb. Helen smiled at Jacob and began ascending, holding Dracon's hand. Episode 25, The Dragon Temple. Sophie was completely at ease during the hike. She was jumping and leaping, leading everyone else. She wore a short denim skirt with patches of cotton fabric to create a funky look and a white sleeveless shirt with a collar. Jacob couldn't help but notice her slender body moving swiftly up the hill. He also noticed that she felt happy around greenery and nature. At least they had something in common, that and their undecided future in the Dragon Clan. Sophie had worn branded sneakers, the kind that make hiking a breeze. Jacob had never thought of buying such expensive shoes. In fact, he never had the kind of money to even look at such shoes. But since Dracon was one of the richest people in the country, it wasn't surprising to see Sophie buy such expensive things. Jacob soon found out that the choice of clothes for Sophie was her mother's doing. Her designer instincts did an amazing job on Sophie's wardrobe. No wonder Sophie always wore such well-paired outfits, complementing her physique so well. Even the popular girls at his college didn't have such a unique fashion sense. Jacob, on the other hand, was wearing a collared shirt with stripes and baggy pants. His shoes were dirty from yesterday's practice, and he obviously didn't have any time to clean them. The only thing about him that could attract any attention was the tiny pink backpack on his back. That, too, didn't belong to him. It was Sophie's. It felt strange for him to be wearing it. Sophie rushed ahead, and Dracon and Helen were walking side by side with Jacob. While Dracon's outfit was casual, Helen went for a young, athletic look by wearing trendy joggers. It was impossible to tell that she was the mother of a girl in high school. They continued climbing up the mountain and were getting close to a peak. At every point, the trio found Sophie outracing them. They always found her waiting on a boulder or sitting on the grass. She impatiently rolled her eyes at them the moment they caught up, like an annoying checkpoint. Her inability to hold herself back reminded Jacob of the times when he went sightseeing with his parents in his childhood. Sophie, along with her family and Jacob, finally reached one of the sights on the mountain. The view was breathtaking and surreal, and the entire patch was surrounded by greenery. The breeze was cooler and the atmosphere was quiet except for the melodious hum of the critters. A stream lazily meandered down the trail, matching the tune of the critters with its gurgling noise. Sophie spread her arms as she looked at the beautiful view and took a deep breath of fresh air. Her tiny nostrils flared as she did that, and Jacob couldn't help but look at her. She was adorable, innocent, and so unique. It was incredibly relaxing and satisfying for all four of them to be one with nature again after having spent a long time in the city.
Now we wait. Let it soak.
Were taking their time to admire and appreciate the scenery around them. Since Jacob did not want to make Sophie uncomfortable, he strolled at a distance. Sophie continued to be an excited rabbit, sprinting and exploring ahead. "Sophie, slow down," Helen cautioned. "Mom, there's a cave here," Sophie screamed passionately from ahead. Helen let out a chuckle. She turned around and waved at Jacob before walking ahead to join Sophie.
Oh, daggone it.
This cave was created due to the impact of the underground water. Streams in the mountain have formed secret paths inside the mountain. When they run into fragile,
bottom lurker
worn-out
and deepest
rocks,
reaches,
they
okay.
burst through. What we have seen on our way here are tributaries. The real water streams are all contained on the inside of the mountain. How come there's no water in it then? Sophie asked curiously. That is because the size and impact of the water streams also depend on the season. When the water stream is affluent, the water will seep through. Of course, it could also be that the stream had been diverted. In other words, this was formerly an exit that was blocked from the inside because of a small-scale landslide, Helen explained patiently. While nodding her head, Sophie's eyes lit up as if she had just discovered a new continent.
Okay.
She pointed ahead. Look, there is some writing over there. Paradise on Earth. This was the doing of one of the ancestors of the Dragon Clan, who meditated in these caves. There is a dragon temple here called Celestial Cloud Temple, though these sites are not accessible to the mortals, Helen patiently elaborated as she walked. Blinking her big eyes, Sophie was intrigued by her heritage and followed her mother closely, observing and listening. Jacob was in awe. He was surprised that Helen was so knowledgeable. Not only was she successful in architectural designs, but she was also very well versed with astronomy, geology, and culture. Everyone began following Helen.
Come on, man.
And moreover, she was able to stop and explain interesting facts and anecdotes from time to time. This not only gave a lot of information to Sophie, but Jacob learned a lot about his new clan too. Her voice was gentle and pleasant, and Jacob was enchanted and had learned a lot just by listening to her. After walking for about 2 hours, they reached the halfway point and decided to go eat at a makeshift restaurant on the mountain. Their tables were outdoors underneath a thick canopy of trees. While they were devouring the meatloaf and fries, they were all taking in the magnificent views of the mountain. Jacob felt that he had been trapped in school for far too long. Today's opportunity to travel with Sophie's family refreshed his eyes and his mind, thanks to the greenery around them and the crisp, untouched streams. He became cheerful and chatty as well. There is a dragon temple on top of this mountain called the Oneness Temple, said Dracon. It was said that one of our ancestors, Elder Elijah, had once cultivated here. The biggest palace in this dragon temple is called the Founder's Palace. All of its shingles were covered with rolled gold. They have a pine tree that is 2,000 years old as well. Moreover, there is a monument that was inscribed by Elder Elijah himself. As he was eating, Dracon suddenly became enthusiastic and smiled at Sophie. That is fun! Sophie looked to her father in anticipation. Let's go check it out after we finish eating. It takes 3 hours to get up there. Since there are no cable cars here, your mom and I will pass on this one. We plan to walk up a little more, but then we will take our time to go back down and get some rest at the hotel, Dracon replied. Aww. Sophie was obviously disappointed. I can totally climb up alone, Sophie said enthusiastically after thinking for a few seconds. No way. We would be worried if you went up there yourself. Helen denied Sophie's proposition. Knowing that she could not defy her parents, Sophie sulkily lowered her head in silence. After their meal, they continued the climb. After walking for about half an hour and having checked out Elder Lord Cave that had immense history, Dracon and Helen were ready to leave. As much as Sophie wanted to continue upwards and to explore the Dragon Temple on top of the mountain, she could only follow her parents' orders now that they had decided to call it a day. Seeing that Sophie was upset and was pouting her lips, Helen said, How about we make an exception and let you continue your tour here on the mountain? Sophie's eyes lit up instantaneously, and a bright smile spread across her face. But there is one condition. Jacob has to accompany you and stay with you at all times. Otherwise, we will be worried, Helen added. Biting her lip, Sophie struggled for a few seconds, but finally concurred. Fine, I want to see what's up there. A shade of joy appeared on Helen's face as she turned to Jacob. Jacob, please stay with Sophie. Come back down as soon as you reach the top of the mountain. Give us a call if you need anything. At your pace, 4 hours should be enough for you to go up and get back down here. It takes approximately 2 more hours to get down to the foot of the mountain, so that would be 6 hours in total. We'll expect you to be back in the hotel by 7 o'clock. Actually, Jacob did not want to go back to the hotel so early either. It was a rare chance for him to be able to be immersed in nature. He nodded at Helen and assured her by saying, "Yes, Helen, I will try my best to look after Sophie." Dracon gave Jacob a light, encouraging nod before turning around and leaving with Helen. Jacob knew very well that Sophie's parents were trying to create opportunities for him and Sophie to get to know each other through spending time alone. However, he did not want to overthink it, as all he wanted now was to visit the legendary Dragon Temple. Likewise, Sophie was thinking the same thing.
We got a gold
After
coin.
her parents had walked far away,
Nice.
she started shouting at Jacob. "Come on, hurry up. Let's go. It's a long way up." After briefly rolling his eyes at her and smiling at her enthusiasm, Jacob looked up at the endless trail and took a step forward to make the climb. Episode 26. Don't hold back. The top of the mountain was 3 hours away from where Sophie and Jacob were standing. It was a long hike back and forth. He and Sophie weren't exactly friends yet, and so Jacob was a bit unsure of the commitment that he had made. But he was willing to put in an effort. Plus, he was excited to see the Dragon Temple and the view from the mountaintop. Jacob looked at the gorgeous view around him. Even if he and Sophie didn't get along, at least the beautiful vistas would make up for it. On the other hand, Sophie was ecstatic. She was practically running up the mountain. It was unclear whether it was because she could not wait to visit the Dragon Temple, or that she was eager to outrace Jacob. Needless to say, Jacob didn't want her to get lost or out of his sight. Taking a deep breath, he sped up and followed closely behind her. "Hurry! Hurry! See how slow you are?" While climbing upwards, Sophie turned around to press Jacob to go faster. Jacob stuck to the speed he was most comfortable with, but kept a close eye on the path Sophie was taking. He was walking at a good speed, though. After all, he was an athlete and a pro at long-distance running, and knew how to properly distribute his physical capacity. Unlike Sophie, who was sprinting without saving some energy for the latter part of their journey. About a half an hour later, Sophie, who had been climbing upwards in haste, was exhausted. Gradually, she began to slow down. Going at a steady pace, Jacob had caught up with Sophie within minutes after she had slowed down. In no time, he ran past her. "Hey!"
Okay.
Seeing that Jacob was going to outrace
Got my
her,
coffee.
Sophie felt that he was going to leave her behind. Jacob was only being playful. He turned around after taking a few steps ahead of her. "What? Can you not run anymore?" he said with a straight face. Sophie's face was bright red. "I just want some water." She reached her arm towards Jacob and said, "Give me some water." Jacob opened her backpack, took out a bottle of water, and handed it to her. After gurgling down half a bottle of water, Sophie threw the bottle back to Jacob, and he caught it. Placing the bottled water back in the backpack, he proceeded to climb slowly and waited patiently for Sophie to catch up. Sophie felt embarrassed at not being able to keep up after making such a fuss about climbing quickly. She slowly started to climb up behind him. She stopped making a fuss completely as she realized how nice Jacob was being to her. He had come on the trip spontaneously at her parents' command. He carried her backpack and even readily agreed to escort her to the top of the mountain. On their way up, Jacob had been going at a steady pace and adjusted it according to his breath. On the other hand, Sophie now felt as if she was torturing herself by climbing. As she tried to keep up with Jacob, she was constantly out of breath, and her face had gone from bright red to pale white. She couldn't walk all that quickly anymore, and took plenty of stops to catch her breath. Jacob opened up the map and studied
Let
it
her
for a
soak
few
for a little
seconds.
while longer.
Well, we're halfway there. At our current pace, we should be able to get there in an hour.
Y'all know where they're at now.
Oh
You've
my
seen all the
God,
locations,
another
so
hour?
don't
Sophie's
think I'm
face
gonna
was filled with despair.
stream very
As she
long,
imagined
much
having
longer.
to repeat the ordeal she had just gone through,
So,
her body couldn't help but feel weak and
showed
powerless.
y'all the locations.
Jacob rolled up the map and got
Good
up on
luck,
his feet
and
again.
hope
Now that
y'all have
Sophie had
a
finally caught her breath, she saw that Jacob was ready to move ahead without much of a break.
wonderful experience.
Her admiration for
Trying to
Jacob
go for it.
immediately vanished, and she called out to him, "I'm still with you, you know. You could have at least given me a heads up before walking again."
Come on.
Jacob turned around and looked at her from afar. "What's
Yep,
wrong?"
get another
he
bite.
asked. You.
Nope.
Sophie was so tired that she couldn't form a complete sentence. "Do you need a break?" Jacob asked. Sophie's face had turned red from suppressing her feelings and her desire for a break. Even though she did need a break, she couldn't bring herself to say the words. She was afraid of giving Jacob a reason to mock or to look down on her. "Oh my, it does seem a little tiring. Let's take a break here then." Jacob put down the backpack and placed it on the grass. He then sat down right next to Sophie. "Well, as long as we both know that you are the one who wants to take a break. I haven't said a word about being tired," Sophie said with pride in her voice. Her face looked pale and she was worn out, but she was fierce and determined. They were sitting quite close and could hear each other's breath.
Okay.
Jacob suddenly remembered that there was a camera in the backpack. He took it out quickly and pointed it at Sophie.
You know what?
He clicked a picture of her, making her raise her eyebrows. "What did you do that for?" she asked. "Well, it's not every day you turn multiple hues of red and pale from climbing a mountain. It is a moment to be remembered," Jacob said as he chuckled. "Give me that camera," said Sophie and lunged at him. Jacob was squatting while clicking the picture and didn't have his feet firmly on the ground. He tumbled down even with the low impact of Sophie's lunge. Sophie was on top of Jacob, still reaching out for the camera, and Jacob continued to move his arms around to keep it away from her. They became children for a few minutes as they fought over the camera, and their clothes were soon enough soiled with mud. It was after several minutes that they realized how close they were to each other. The warmth of their bodies was suddenly evident to both of them. They looked at each other and stopped fighting. Jacob was pinned to the ground with Sophie's hands clutching his arms tightly. She slowly released her hands and began to get up, but fell on Jacob's chest. Jacob slowly held her arms and helped her up. She looked down on the ground and hid her blush. Jacob got up too and said, "I can delete the picture if you want." "No, that's okay," said Sophie, with her gaze stuck to the grass near her shoes. "Let's take a picture together then," he suggested. Sophie looked up in surprise. I just thought your mom and dad might like it if we do. I mean, they want us to get along, don't they?" said Jacob,
Which one?
trying to break the sexual tension. Sophie quietly nodded and stood next to him to pose. They both smiled at the camera and immediately stepped aside after getting clicked. Promptly, Jacob put the camera back into the backpack and stood up. "That's enough of a break. Let's get going." Jacob turned around and saw that Sophie's face was bright red from trying to catch up. He thought for a second and decided to slow down. "If I had my dragon core, I could outrun you 100 times, Sophie said quietly.
The silver coin.
"If you can't climb any more, it's not too late for us to turn back," Jacob proposed sincerely. There wasn't a trace of mockery in his tone. But Sophie was determined. "Who said I couldn't climb anymore? I will get to the top of the mountain for sure." Jacob's mouth curved into a smile as he actually found Sophie's determination to be quite commendable. Sophie's face was bright red as they climbed, and she was sweating profusely. Clutching her fist tightly, she abruptly took a deep breath and outran Jacob again. After that, She continued to run even faster. Jacob could only speed up and run alongside her. Just when they began to doubt whether they could make it in time, things took a different turn. As they followed the trail and walked around a big, thick tree, the golden eaves of the Dragon Temple suddenly came into their view. "Ha! We made it!" Sophie shouted out of joy. She didn't hold back her happiness of overcoming the mountain. Jacob also felt delighted. He was surprised, yet satisfied to see that their efforts had come to fruition. At the same time, he was a little concerned. It had taken a long time and a lot of physical strength for them to reach the mountaintop. Would they be able to get back to the hotel by 7 as they had planned? "Bubblehead, hurry up and don't get lost." Seeing that Jacob was hesitant and hadn't moved an inch, Sophie couldn't control her excitement and yelled at Jacob like he was the one delaying them all along. Jacob grinned as he felt the notorious Sophie coming back into her avatar and followed her towards the temple.
What do we got? Come on. Dig on it. There.
Episode 27. The Walk at Dusk. Sophie leaped towards the Dragon Temple, and Jacob followed her enthusiastically. The golden eaves of the temple were soaking up the last bit of the afternoon sun, and the entire structure was gleaming. Since it was afternoon and the temple was situated on top of the mountain, there weren't any visitors. As there were no cable cars, only people who were fit and determined, like Jacob and Sophie, were able to visit the temple at this hour. Otherwise, one would have to start climbing early in the morning in order to arrive here by noon, and then spend the entire afternoon getting back down. Besides, the temple was kept a secret from the mortals, and no one except the Dragon Clan visited this serene place. Due to such odd hours, Sophie and Jacob didn't run into any visitors. In the yard of the Dragon Temple, volunteers were sweeping up fallen leaves. Sophie, who was yelling and shouting with excitement on her way in, had become quiet as soon as she stepped into the temple. The paving bricks in the yard were of different colors and had been put together to create a massive meditative pose. In the southwest corner of the yard, there was a tall, ancient pine tree. Jacob knew that this must be the 1,000-year-old tree Dracon had mentioned. With a heart filled with respect, he walked over to it calmly. As the temple did not have many visitors, the ancient tree had not been kept inside a fence. It had quietly taken its place.
All right, guys, we're gonna call it stream today.
Jacob walked
right
up
here.
and reached out his hand,
So,
gently caressing its trunk, which was full of senescence and
as you
fortitude.
can tell, we only caught 2 of them pretty quickly.
Its bark was rock solid and smooth.
We still got Goldstein.
From its outer appearance, it did not even
still
look like
have,
wood anymore.
Mamlambo
began
and
running the
Goto
concentration cultivation
yet.
scroll
So,
and was becoming aware of nature's
y'all have a
essence
good one,
nearby.
and hope you enjoyed.
He was
I hope
actually
it
able
helps.
to receive a burst of condensed wood essence from the rigid bark of the ancient pine.